I'll talk about 4 major things. One, just the earthquake relief work. I think that's something everywhere I've gone, people have been very interested in. So I want to talk about Haiti and Chile and what we're trying to do there. I want to talk about neighborhood revitalization, which I think is just a central issue for Michigan and is our big theme basically now. I want to talk about advocacy, which I think you have done so well in this state, and really been a model of the power of advocacy and in engaging our churches and faith communities, engaging our local communities, and getting our collective voice at the local level, state level, and national level for good housing policy. I want to just mention our capital campaign as well, and then happy to talk about anything you all want to talk about, but how do we have the most impact in a community? And clearly Michigan is right up there with Florida and Arizona and some other parts where I think this started asking more from a donor perspective than our perspective, as donors were saying and cities were saying, you know, should you be building so many homes when there are all these empty homes out there and everyone's reading about them, people can see them. And so it's a practical response. And our answer is it's not a one or the other, but the reality is if it's actually cheaper to rehab a home all in and get a family in that house and it meets our criteria than it is to build a new home. And that in fact actually helps the neighborhood by removing an empty home. And empty homes are just, I don't need to tell all of you, nothing good happens when houses sit empty. They just rot, they devalue very quickly, they suck down the values of the homes around them, and they invite in crime. And so it is, I know many of you are already working very closely, either demolishing homes and so you can put new homes in their place, or starting to do rehabs. And I know rehabs are harder, they're not always as volunteer friendly, there's complexity, there are all the rules of meeting the new housing guides, so not easy. But I think it's a way to help people rethink about habitat. And then if we think about a mix of new homes, rehabs, brush with kindness, weatherization, the chance to touch more families, I think it's a chance for Habitat to actually have a greater total footprint in the chance to really turn around or build or accelerate the recovery of communities. And we're very excited about it. The third piece I want to just mention is advocacy. And again, I want to thank and Sandy, who have been great examples. And so much of important advocacy happens at the state level. Most of it happens at the local level, and then some of it happens at the federal level. And Habitat really needs to be active in all of those places. And advocacy, sort of right large, there's some very specific things we want to work on, which are near and dear to your hearts, things like the SAFE Act, which are very specific things that are going to have a huge impact on Habitat. Then there are broader issues like secure tenure around the world, so that in its worst case, there's so many communities around the world where if a woman's husband dies, she and her children lose their home because it belongs to his family. And then when you layer in the scourge or the stigma of HIV/AIDS, if that's the cause of death, which is too often the case, they are literally kicked out and sent away. So we've been able to actually have real impact by changing the laws to have joint title. I would say restores are both our biggest opportunity, and God bless them, the Charlotte folks did a big national study and went out and took their initiative to, they probably interviewed some of you and they got all the data. We've got well over 500 restores. It's almost a $500 million revenue opportunity. So again, when you add Habitat together, it gets big. We're the largest private home builder in the country now, 10th largest of any kind, and we're running collectively a big chain of restores. It's great environmentally, it's a great community story, it's great visibility for your affiliate, and it's a source of unrestricted funding. So it's kind of a win-win-win. Pointed to anonymous, I don't know, we don't know who originally said, but an imaginary conversation that really got my attention a long time ago. And one person was saying, I look out and I see all this poverty and desperation and misery and sadness, and I just want to ask God sometimes, why don't you do something about it when you could? And so why don't you ask Him? Because I'm afraid He might ask me the same question. And I want to thank all of you because you are doing something about it. And it is, we talk about all these big numbers, but all those big numbers are made up of individual families whose lives are getting turned around. And that's starting with mine and hopefully yours as well. And I hope you all know the joy of getting to be part of something that is so much bigger than ourselves, and the joy of getting to do something that really does matter. and it's practical and tangible and truly transformational. We have big goals for HFHI. We set the target, we actually raised the target. Our goal was to triple over the first 5 years. We're ahead of schedule, and so we changed it. Now we want to help 100,000 families per year by 2013, which is slightly intimidating. We actually don't have the funds in the Habitat system to do that. So the other piece, and you'll continue to hear more, it's still in the quiet phase, but we're launching the biggest capital campaign by far in Habitat's history, and the first truly global. Were many of you involved with More Than Houses? I see some nods. We've set an initial target based on the feasibility study of $3.9 billion. Habitat has gotten big. When we add all of us together now, last year, total revenue was about $1.5 billion. About a third of that is House Sales Fund for Humanity, but that's a lot of funding around the world. We're really trying to make this a truly global campaign. Well, is that the core principle is to be donor-centric. It's not to go in with a vision of extracting money. And I used to hate fundraising until I sort of got the mental switch to go, I'm helping somebody find meaning in their life and be able to do something that really matters. And that sort of turns it. But in order to do that, you have to take the time to listen to a donor and understand what fires them up, and then figure out how to tailor whether Habitat fits that vision of impact that they want to have. Then we have to paint a story of Habitat mattering. I was at an exciting lunch on Saturday, a couple days ago, and with 6 CEOs of fairly significant Brazilian companies. And we were talking about Habitat, and they knew a little about Habitat, and one of them had organized lunch for us, and he's all fired up. And it was really interesting. They said, we'll engage, but if you just want to write a little check, we'll write a little check, but if you want us to really engage, tell us you're going to do something that's going to really matter. And they wanted a big vision of Habitat doing something to matter, and we'll never build enough to solve all the housing needs in our communities. But if we do what we do and do it in conjunction with others, then you can start talking about a scale of impact that can get a donor motivated. But it really starts to me with what does the donor care about, and linking in. The other really big insight out of the early campaign research, and I would strongly encourage y'all to connect with this, it's really helped me, is that when you look, housing is just not one of the giant, at the top of people's emotional list. And the two big ones, and then there's a big drop down after that. Stories are what change hearts, so don't stop the story. Health and education have giant resonance, and housing, people care about housing, but it's just not in the same place. If we can show people the link between housing, health, and education, and the links are actually very compelling, that starts changing. So a core part of the campaign theme is actually connecting how getting a child in a decent home transforms their health, and then if they're healthy, gives them a shot at education, and we can show the correlations in terms of health and educational outcomes. You look at lead paint and asbestos, and there are lots of correlations in the U.S. to unhealthy housing and poor educational and health outcomes, and I think that's a helpful one, and we're going to keep trying to build the case studies. There are tons of good causes, there are tons of needs, goodness knows out there in the world, but there are very few that are so tangibly transformational, where we can physically see, touch, and participate in God's, in the delivery of the good news in a very real way to people. So we get to be part of it, which is a pretty cool thing.